Step number 11 is adding cost resources into the schedule. Now the three columns you're going to need to have in the schedule are the cost column, the percent complete column, and the actual cost column, as I have shown right there. The cost column is what we're going to do to add resources because we're building our baseline schedule. So we're going to go ahead and add individual cost per line item into the schedule. Now you see there's some activities like project schedule submission or anchor bolt submittal. You may not be able to bill the client for some of the activities. However, there are some activities, the majority of them should have costs associated with them, like mobilization of $20,000. So we're going to add cost to every individual activity. And some costs may be zero and some costs may be 50,000, just depends on the activity. Once we have added all the cost in, we want to double check ourselves by looking at the S curve, the cash flow curve. If you go to reports and go to cost and cash flow, here's a report that I have developed, and this shows you here how I developed this report. I selected a task based on time with the actual cost, the budgeted cost of work scheduled, the cost and the cumulative cost, and the schedule value anticipated. So these are the columns that are shown in this graph, and you can see in this graph it'll show you every individual period how many costs we're incurring. 8,000 in in July, and 20,000 in August, and 55,000 in September. So the line, the S curve, the actual cash flow curve, shows us how many costs we're incurring each individual period. If I want to see how many costs I've incurred to date, I can go ahead and say, okay, 8 plus 20 is 28,000. So it doesn't mean that, hey, this period makes $12,000, and we're 20,000 at the end of August. No, this is for each individual period, and you can tell that because this one has a $417,000 number, right? So that's down, that's 417, and then it goes to 608, even though it's less here. There's less of a dollar value here. So the S curve plots each individual period. So at the end of January 2018, we should be $722,000. And of course, at February, we're going to be done with the project, and it's $724,500. So by adjusting numbers, we want to try to look, we can plot a line straight across here, and we want to look at the difference between a line that's straight across, and a good way to doing that is just by drawing a line, right? So if you drew a line here straight across from beginning to end, the difference here is, difference between what we actually are and what we hypothetically are. We want to get our S curve as close on the bottom end to this line as possible, within the constraints of what we're going to be billing for the clients or whatever. In this case, we're not making too much money on the front end of this project. So if we go back, let's go back to the Gantt chart view here real quick, and maybe just some money. And keep in mind, we're trying to put together a schedule at the very beginning, very, very beginning, and that's tough to do, because we may not have all the data. So, we can take some money from the back end, and I'm just going to throw, we're supposed to move money around from tasks that take place at the very, very end, and I'm just going to say, instead of 20,000, I'm just going to throw an extra zero in there and call it, 200,000. So, and I would move that money from another activity, but I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. I would go back to my cash flow, and you can see that, that's a dramatic example, but you're seeing that we're coming closer to that hypothetical line. Remember, that hypothetical line tells us, if a project's 10 months, every month we should incur 10%. Reality is that we do most of the work in the middle third and do little work in the first third and the last third. So it's important not just throwing money in, but looking at the S curve, looking at the cash flow to make sure that we keep ourselves and our subs out of trouble, and we bill appropriately. We can also look at this to make sure if people, we throw our cost in there, our subs, we also want to make sure everybody's staying as honest as possible. So if we see something, and we go back to the Gantt chart view in here, and I'm going to again mess with this number, and we have a ridiculous number, right? And then when we were to look back at our cash flow off our reports, you can see we're above the line, on the very front end of the project. So it's not just making sure we have enough dollars to put aside to be able to execute the work, but it's also making sure that none of the subs you're working with are asking more money in the front end and are front loading the schedule. So that's why looking at the S-curve is important. And once again, you can see how the report is put together. It's a time-based report with all the different columns here. So, and that pretty much covers everything to do with adding cost resources into your schedule.